Should I do should I put in my headphones? Is that like going to give you a clearer signal?
No, I actually just noticed that I'm wearing mine unintentionally.
Okay,
Yeah,
here, 1 second.
but we're actually I opened the stream to the crew, so we're live. Super chilled.
Oh, we're recording. Okay, cool.
Yeah. No sound check. We're doing it live.
We'll do it live.
We'll do it live. All right, everybody. Well, welcome. For those of you tuning in live on Facebook, I'm here with a good friend of mine and an incredible composer, arranger, orchestrator, and trombonist, Javier Nero. And we're going to be talking about Javier's album, Kemet, The Black Land, and some just general big band uh, writing secrets tonight. But first of before we do all of that, Javier, how's the traffic over there in DC?
It was okay. There was a little car accident. I think people are still driving unsafely on the ice and everything. We had a big snowstorm a few days ago, so
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Us too. Well, I'm glad you got there safely, here safely, wherever you are, safely. Cool. Well, man, why don't we talk a little bit about Kemet? How you recorded it, maybe, and where you recorded it, and sort of the broad scope of the album.
yeah. So we recorded in Arlington, Virginia. Well, actually, sorry, I take that back. Springfield, Virginia. They're all, all these little suburbs in the DC area right next to each other. There's a recording studio there called Bias. And the engineer there actually has been in charge of recording like pretty much like all of the military bands for like the last like 30, 40 years. So he's pretty experienced doing big band stuff. And I think we did 4 days of recording, but we did kind of like somewhat of like half days. We did from 12 noon until 6 p.m. each day, make sure people could take care of business in the morning and then make it to their gigs and stuff too. And it was also nice just chop wise to make sure everyone was kind of fresh every day. Um, and yeah, so I mean, that was the process there. We did most of the recording. We actually recorded 15 charts, which ended up being like over like 130 minutes of music. So there's actually quite a few tracks. There's 4 tracks that didn't end up on the album. And the album itself is 9 tracks. And then there was 2 other singles, Contemplation and It's All Right With Me, that aren't technically on the physical copy because that would have put it over the time limit as well. But those were released digitally. Yeah, so we still have 4 other tracks that we haven't released. So I'm hoping to get back into the studio maybe for another 2 days and record like probably 4 or 5 more and put out another album soon.
So what is the process like of getting all that music together for the session? Like, you're writing with a purpose? Are you writing with the intention of recording an album? Like you had a big band in New York City before you moved out to the DC area. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, my process has always been just to write music and enjoy writing tunes. Like composition for the majority of my life so far has always just been this thing for myself that I enjoy doing. And I haven't really done that much writing for other people, although I'm starting to do more. And I like doing it, but at the same time, it's kind of like I kind of want to just keep my little baby, and have that for myself, and not feel the pressure to do it on deadlines and everything. But basically, I've been like a lot of these tunes are things I started writing like all the way as far back as when I was an undergrad, like 2010, 2011, and a couple tunes. I ended up feeling like they were good ideas, and I went back and kind of reorchestrated them with fresh ears and more, technical expertise in the arranging field, and kind of brought them back up to like par. Um, but generally, yeah, I'm just writing for fun and just trying to use it as like a way of critically thinking, really, like trying to figure out what it is that I hear musically and put that, you know, on paper and figure out exactly what that is. That's one of the great things about arranging. You play a solo and it's gone. you know, but when you write something out and you get to hear it the same way every time, um, it kind of gives you a better picture and crystallization of like who you are as a musician. And that's one of the things I really love about writing.
So would you say you're a fan of editing charts?
Um, I don't love the process of it, but I love the result, you know, like it's kind of, you know, sometimes like it's like kind of emotionally taxing to reopen a finale file and like, oh, I have to make all these little edits to make this sound better, and I just don't feel like doing it. But once you do it, it's like a payoff, you know, when you hear the chart sound more crisp, more clean, better, you know, sounding, more fuller voicings, et cetera, and stuff. I do think it's worth the extra effort.
So what kind of like little shifts and changes do you find yourself making through the editing process?
Well, you know, one of the things I used to do in some of my old charts, is I would just have like a lot of sustained notes in like all of the horn parts. You know, like if I had like a set of chord changes and a melody over it, maybe I'd have the trombones be like in my earlier big band arrangements, I'd be like chord, chord, chord. You know what I mean? Stuff like that. And now I've become much more aware about um, not only just varying like background figures or accompaniment figures rhythmically to kind of keep things like moving forward at certain forward momentum, but also just thinking more consciously about um, saving people's chops and making sure that like the endurance factor is there when people need to stand up to play a solo, that they're going to feel ready to do that. Or if the lead trumpet player has to play something high, they didn't just play like 16 bars of long tones in the middle register before they have to play like a high note, you know? So I think a lot more about pacing and the arc of where something is going, in order to get to moments that actually that are big, you know, contrasts and dynamics.
Yeah, for sure. So you brought up something super interesting, which is just, the concept of rhythmic, punches and interjections and development throughout, your years of writing like big, long held notes. Do you think about when you're writing this, do you think about like rhythm, melody, and harmony as a connected structure, or do you think about those as separate entities? Like, do you have an inspiration for harmony first, and then you assign a rhythm to it after you've discovered the voicing, or do you have any reflections on that?
Um, yeah, I mean, I feel like that's more of like the compositional process, like, you know, like when I'm writing a tune. Um, well, I guess every tune is a little bit different, but I would say generally speaking, it usually starts out with like some type of vibe or vamp kind of thing that I'm hearing in my head, and then I expand upon that like little nugget or cell, um, into something bigger, maybe like a set of chord changes, or like some type of little bass line figure, or some small melodic element that expands outward into a full tune. But I do think that like generally, like most of my tunes probably start with um, harmony first. You know, um, I actually just wrote a new arrangement recently. You know, like in the hearing all the Christmas tunes and all that kind of standard jazz kind of stuff that comes around every year around the holidays. And I just wrote this tune. I called it Holiday Waltz. And like for me, that was kind of a rare instance where I kind of like sat down at the piano and I immediately had like a melody in my head. And then all I had to do was just harmonize it. But since I kind of wanted it to sound standard, and like I was kind of done composing the bulk of the melody and the changes in probably like 20, 30 minutes.
That's pretty fast, dude.
Yeah. Well, didn't write it out on finale, but like I could, you know, I knew what it was, you know.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Man, let me ask you this. It's a showy question, but I'm curious. Do you ever know like how long it takes you roughly to like write a chart from start to finish, not including the editing process?
Um, I would say that depends on each chart too, but like I think when I was younger, like when I was doing all those kind of dumb things like arranging wise that I was talking about, I think that was the period of time where I could write the fastest. But like now I feel like the editing is happening like in real time while I'm writing. So I
Hmm.
feel like it always takes me a long time to write stuff now. because like while I'm doing it, I'm like, was that really the best decision? And then I'll go back to those 4 bars and like change something before I move on. But I mean, like if I had to, if someone's like, I'm going to give you $10,000 if you finish a chart tonight and give it to me before my band plays at 10 p.m., then I could probably get something done, but it's not going to be like my best work.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? I could get a head chart and like maybe like a little outro fermata situation and like some backgrounds done in a couple hours. I probably could do that, but I'm not going to be proud of that arrangement probably.
Yeah, well, I think you hit on a nice point there too. Just, going off of what you said, I think like as a working arranger, composer, orchestrator, I think that one does have to have that skill 100%. I think that having that skill and like even just, having that be possible, that's something that people work towards for in some cases like their whole careers, their whole lives is like, I want to be able to write a big band chart in like 4 hours and 24 hours and 48
Yeah.
hours, in a week. At a certain point, like you can end up pushing the chart off for so long. I think having the skills to be able to, if you needed to or wanted
Yeah.
to, or had the inspiration to, which clearly you do, to do that. I think that that's super important. I think that that's yeah, and it's interesting to hear your approach to the editing process as well, and like how that's included now um in your actual like writing process. I've always been jealous. I'm a pianist. I've always been jealous of people who actually play in the ensemble, play a horn in the ensemble, saxophone, trombone, and trumpet. And honestly, especially envious of trombonists because you guys are just sitting there in the middle of the whole thing. You get all of the sound around you. You're pushing it forward. You're having to listen super hard to blend with the saxophones in front of you. You're also like, hearing the trumpet screaming behind you and trying to fit in there too. Some of my favorite composers, arrangers, orchestrators are trombonists, and I don't think that that's an accident. Um, and so when I hear you say talk about the editing process and thinking about like, okay, was that the best decision? Are they going to need to breathe here? This and that. Like, I think that that's just super cool to hear. As a pianist, like I think about like comping rhythms, um, improvisationally, and how can I include that sort of spontaneous rhythmic element in my writing. So hearing it from the trombonist's perspective is is super. So I want to just change the subject a little bit, and I want to chat a little bit about Kemet, your album. Um, you know, let's talk about let's pick a couple of tracks to talk about. Like and we can talk about anything. There's like some beautiful, like super lush voicings on the ballad. Let's just let go,
Oh,
right?
okay. Yeah.
And then, and then like the groove that you use on the blues reincarnated, um, just thinking about how you mentioned groove-based writing and building out from there in the ways that you start that with the trombone section, then later on it's in the rhythm section during the piano solo. And then there's the time, the time piece, which is it's so cool to just hear that melody develop over time. I mean, it's a great album. So I want to talk about two things. I want to talk about like the overall like vision message of the album, like how the pieces of music communicate that story in your mind and in your art. And then I also want to chat a little bit once we've talked about just like the broad that broad artistic vision, like how are you using your craft to achieve that goal?
Yeah. To be honest with you, I don't really see myself as someone that's like really ever trying to like purposefully push some type of like message or agenda through my music. Like I mean, like, and the majority of my pieces are titled. Well, actually, all of them are titled after they've been composed. I'm not sure how you do that, but like I've never actually sat down at the piano and said to myself, "I'm going to write something that evokes this idea," or "I'm feeling sad. Let me write a sad tune," or "This event happened in my life. Let me try to write something that evokes." I've never done that. I always just write music and then think about how that sounds and like what does that look like to me, or how does that sound, and then title pieces after that. So even on the tune Kemet, which is kind of the title track, and there is like, you know, the actual like historic place of what that is. There is a story around it. I chose that word because I think that the piece kind of evokes that kind of idea. It is like a mixture of kind of all these different influences that I've had throughout my life. A lot of African rhythms, a lot of wind ensemble, like European style, um, you know, Western classical music. I played in wind ensemble for like through middle school and high school. So I've like always kind of had those types of sounds. I don't know if you've like heard those composers like Frank Giachelli and what's the other guy, Alfred Reed. Some of those like wind ensemble composers, there's like a very specific sound and the way that they would voice chords and stuff. And I definitely have that influence in me, whether I've studied those scores specifically. I've just been hearing it for so many years. And when I used to have those conversations about Kemet with my brothers, it just felt like that was like the way that piece came together kind of felt like a kindred spirit with that, you know, with the actual musical elements in that piece. But
Yeah,
I didn't set out to like, oh, I'm gonna compose a song that has African elements mixed with this. That's just like my musical identity. It was just me again. Like it's like writing is critical thinking, you know. So like you're thinking about all how you're bringing together all of these elements of who you are as a musician and putting it on the page.
I love that. Writing is critical thinking. That's the second time you've said it.
Yeah,
Well, man, do you mind sharing a little bit about Kemet, like what it was, what it means to you, and um, if you want to.
sure. I mean, yeah, I mean, it's Kemet is, and like it's an interesting thing too because I feel like there's a little bit of like controversy. I've had discussions with some of my friends who think that it's like not like a real place. There is like a little bit of this like folklorish element. Regardless of that, for me, the idea of it is what is interesting and inspiring. And Kemet was an ancient form of what is now modern day Egypt. It was occupied by African people, and it was like a very advanced civilization. Um, and they say that that's where, like, you know, that's the time period where the pyramids and a lot of these artifacts and stuff were built. Um, and Romans and Greeks and all of these other respected cultures would come there to learn about the sciences, about agriculture, about pretty much anything. And they'd also share information with each other. So it was just like, it was kind of like the New York of the ancient world. You know, this is where all the people, the who's who, would show up and hang out and share information. And yeah, it was just kind of a cool idea that happened to be in Africa. Because now we think about Africa and it's kind of like a little bit behind the rest of the world in a lot of ways. So it's
Hmm.
cool to think that was there at one point.
Yeah, for sure. And just on a personal reflection note, I was just in Egypt a couple of weeks ago, and
Oh, nice.
that word came up, Kemet came up, and it made me think of you and your beautiful album as well. So can we switch gears again and let's talk a little bit more music shop.
Cool.
Let's talk about some of the tracks on the record.
Sorry,
I was
what did you
gonna
want me to say
ask about
something?
I was gonna well no, I mean I was gonna ask about I mean I man I really do love the whole record. Um there's some beautiful uh you know harmony in there, and there's that one piece I'm forgetting which one it is, but it's got like the hemiola effect happening throughout. Um but maybe we can just start with the title track, The Blues Reincarnated, and maybe we can talk a little bit about your writing process. The first track, not the title track, the first track, and talk
Yeah,
a little bit about your writing process for that one.
yeah, that one is 100% starting with like just like a vamp on the piano. You know, I was just playing that little that beep bum, 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 and it's just like that common tone that goes through all of those chords.
Yeah, right.
Um, what is it like? D minor, C7 sus, B7 alt, B flat major 7, A minor 9, or A minor 11, A flat major 7 sharp 11, and then the G7 is finally where it feels like it gets to that resolution. So it's just like I was just kind of messing around with that D on the top, and then it goes. And then of course, then the next part, it's like, oh, what are we gonna do now? Well, you have this cool vamp. We go to the 4 chord, do it a fourth up, and that's basically what it is. So it ends up just being it ends up being just like essentially, if you like take out all of those moving pieces, it's basically just like a 1-4-1 blues, you know, and that's kind of and then it has the element of the funk thing. So that's kind of why I titled it like the blues reincarnated, how like the blues kind of keeps coming back in these different forms, in different styles of music, because funk is basically blues, you know. um
Hmm.
and jazz has obviously elements of blues in it too. But that piece and some of the other stuff I haven't released yet. I used to practice with this app called Drum Genius. I don't know if you've heard of that.
Sure, of course.
And so like I would just like put on these like I think I was playing with like this like Clyde Stubblefield like drum beat, this funk thing, and I would just sit at the piano and just like listen to the beat and then come up with these like little piano riffs and stuff. And that's what that tune just started off as. And then
Hmm.
eventually, I added just that little melody that comes back, and you know, so that's like, I mean, compositionally, that tune is mostly just, to me, it's kind of just like a jam tune, and like the rhythmic variation and some of the harmony and the solos are what like allow it to propel, and you know,
Yeah. Was there any amount of like editing in that chart, or I'm always curious to hear the like different composers' processes. It almost sounds like what you do from, it changes. It's not the same every time, which is, cool. You write a certain amount, and then like, as you're writing that amount, you're also asking yourself the questions like, is this good? Is this like exactly what I heard in my head? And then you move on to the next section and so on and so forth.
yeah.
That one written like that, or was this one that you wrote and then like returned to it and said like, oh man, I got to make some finale adventures right now?
Yeah, this one wasn't like yeah, I made like a major addition to it later. I think that second solely, the like after the piano solo, there's that little interlude, that bup bup bum bup bup beat up booty bup, that thing, and then there's another one that happens later, the bee dee dee bup bup da da dee doo dee.
Yeah,
That one
right,
I
right, right.
added in later, because like
Okay.
originally what happened is we would go back to that same interlude a second time, and then
Uh-huh.
have another soloist. And I was like, oh, that's lame. We should have a different interlude the second time. So that was
That's
like the big edit
interesting.
on that one. And I just tried to make sure that like that there was some rhythmic variation. Otherwise, like it would just be so repetitive. The other tune, Jam Number 3, is another one like that too. It just started like me playing along with one of those Drum Genius grooves, and I came up with that little piano figure, and then I just kind of try to rhythmically vary it, and then there's like that whole middle section where it just vamps on like the D major 7. And Sean has the solo on there, and that's still in keeping with that same like little 3-note cell that I was doing. It's like a whole step and then a fourth, and in the right hand of the piano, and that's like just another rendition of it, you know.
Yeah. Man, do you find you write from the piano more, or from the trombone more, or just like in the abstract more?
I never write from the trombone. Yeah, like I've never like sat at like played something on trombone, and then it's always been like, yeah, sitting at the piano and coming up with something, even if I can't play it like all the way, then I write it out and then I can hear it back to myself, because like I'm like, you know, I'm not like a great piano player, but I can play, like all I can do on piano is play chords and bass lines, but like I can't really play melodies. So a lot of times when I'm writing a tune, I'll be able to kind of play like the rhythm section part of it, like the bass line and the chords, and then I'll
Mhm.
sing the melodies. All of like pretty much every melody that I've ever written is like something that I've like been singing.
Yeah, man, I love that.
If,
Singing's
if
definitely a part of the
yeah,
writing process.
yeah, if at any point I get better at piano, I wonder if like my like my compositional, like my melodies will change a lot because then I can actually execute a lot more. And, you know,
That's interesting. Are you seeking a
yeah.
change in your writing?
Am I what?
Are you seeking a change in your writing?
Um, I don't know. There's been points, where I feel like I'm in a rut and I'm just kind of like rewriting the same chart in a different way. But um, yeah, like lately, like the last two tunes I wrote, well, actually one of the most recent things other than that holiday one I was telling you about, I revamped another old composition of mine that I wrote like in 2010. And so yeah, I've been kind of digging back into older stuff and like bringing it back, bringing it to like to the level that I hear it now. And that's kind of been like an interesting way of kind of changing my writing too, because I think that I was hearing things differently um, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, but I think that there were some good elements there, but they weren't like complete.
Man, I totally feel that. Just that rawness that we have when we're in our youth and writing without or creating art without knowing what we're doing right or wrong for that matter. You know, we might not go down all the side streets. We might not see all there is to see. But we encounter quite a bit of
Yeah.
ourselves along the way. It can be super powerful to revisit those. Yeah, man. Wow. I just had like a major like a major realization of my own actually. Just hearing you talk. So thank you, Professor. And which by the way, you are a professor at Peabody.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've been
Yeah.
teaching there for a few years now, or a couple years really.
Any
Um,
young composers we should be on the lookout for?
um, there are some students there that have some potential, but I think that they haven't put enough time in yet. Um, so yeah, I mean, I definitely think there's a couple students that have a lot of potential to be good writers. But one of the big things for me is when I was an undergrad, I was like writing all the time. Like, I was in a check out this combo I was in my sophomore year at Juilliard was Josh Richmond on piano, Josh Crumbly on bass, Jimmy McBride on drums, Lucas Pino on tenor, Eddie Barbash on alto, and Kyle Athade on trumpet, and me on trombone, obviously. And between me, Kyle Athade, and like Lucas Pino, like we were always just like playing like all these like great originals. And so that's kind of how I like kind of started learning how to write, was just bringing stuff in, trial and error method. I try to bring in like something new like every week, and then I hear these great guys play it and they'd be like, oh, this sounds weird, or this is really hard to play. I don't see a lot of students taking advantage of that as much as they should, because you can take a bunch of arranging classes, but if you're not doing the thing and really hearing your music back, it's like, you know,
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's something that needs to be said a lot more, which is that if you want to get better at writing, you gotta do it. And you also have to have like a system of a way of approaching it, and
yeah.
mentorship and guidance should be a huge part of that journey as well. Yeah. Um, I'll never forget a personal experience. I'll share really quickly. You know Matt Jodrell, right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Man, one of my earliest big band recording sessions, I brought in this chart of it's on YouTube. It's I'm just a shy guy. And at the end of the session, Matt comes up to me. He he had actually forgot his wallet at the studio and he called me and I was still there like helping pack up and whatever. And he called me up and he was like, "Hey Steve, is my wallet there?" And I was like, "Let me look." "Yeah, it is." He's like, I got to come back. I got to come back and grab it, in his Australian accent. Like I was like, man, I'm actually heading over to the train right now. You want me to just bring it? Like we'll meet halfway. He's like, absolutely. So yada yada yada. Go to meet Matt. Have his wallet. I give him his wallet back. He's like, thanks, man. I was like, dude, how was the session? Yeah, and he's like, that was quite a lead trumpet part. And I was like, man, thank you so much. That means a lot to me. And he goes, no, man, that was not a compliment. And I've just had so many experiences of learning the hard way of
But like, did he give you any details about it? Like,
oh yeah, it was way too high. Not enough rest. I those are really the two things. So I learned a lot,
yeah.
from doing this stuff wrong. Um, you know,
At a certain point, though, you also have to like push back because like anyone that's a creative person, you're not going to always write stuff the way everything else has been written,
and
right? So
yes, it can be played and you're hearing it, like just because it doesn't make Matt Jodrell the happiest lead trumpet player on the planet, you know. I mean,
yeah,
it's like I learned a lot, and I also learned that I liked what I wrote. And I learned that there was another way to do it that was actually more successful.
yeah,
And like you said, when you're a creative person and you want to say something, like regardless of whether you're trying to push a message or not, like when we create art and we share art into the world, like we're presenting an authentic version of ourself. That's there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Like that is what we're doing when we put music out. It is self-expression. That is like in that is what music is. And
yeah,
like it's not all that music is. So if you hear something, you write it. Um, but I never frown on the opportunity to hear right from the lead trumpet player himself
yeah.
how how I could have done better. Um, so as a professor, Javier, um, if we could rewind like, however long to that freshman sophomore year at Juilliard when you were in that ensemble, that badass ensemble with all those cats in it, what is one thing that you would have told yourself looking back that you think really would have helped your writing back then? Like, what is one thing that you would offer, one piece of advice that you would offer to any young composer, but young Javier composer?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, I feel like, like that was the process that I needed was just to be doing it really often. And like that's the big, I guess I could have like spent more time seeking out more information from people. But in a lot of ways, I feel like that would have actually kind of like, like when you first start writing, and that's another interesting thing. I start thinking about all these like tangential ideas. Um, is like listening to some of my old stuff. There's so many, it's like a constellation of ideas. And I wrote some tunes that sounded like exactly like a jazz standard. Then I'd write this other thing that sounds like some like smooth jazz thing. And then I'd write something else that sounds like almost classical. And like when you're first starting, it's like you're just throwing out these, like, for lack of a better idea, like the Jackson Pollock, you're just like throwing these different ideas out.
Right.
And uh, eventually you kind of start to narrow down and kind of find something, and then you can still write different styles, but it seems to be more closer to your identity when you write in those styles, as opposed to like writing something that just sounds like it's like a, it's like, it sounds like someone else, you know? Um, like I don't write like Nelson Riddle or like Frank Foster or something. You know what I mean? Like I don't sound, even if I tried, it's going to sound a little bit different than that. So in some ways, I actually feel like the first few things you write, you should just write. Just write some stuff and have some people play it back, and then you kind of do the editing process for a while, and then eventually have someone kind of, hey, like check this out, do this, do that, do that. But like in some way, like if you have someone like immediately telling you, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, it kind of almost thwarts like the learning process because you need to kind of do that and like fail, you know?
Yep. Yeah. I always tell all my students the more times you fail, the more intentional your successes become.
Yeah. Yeah, the failure part is good, and just also just getting some ideas out, and not feeling that you need to be like tread so lightly. It's just music. Like no one's going to get hurt. You know what I mean? Sometimes I feel like people are like
Yeah.
so scared of
100%.
writing something or hearing what it is that they wrote and what other people are going to think about it, that they don't want to, you can overthink.
Yep. Yeah. Writing from a place of fear rather than from a place of openness.
Yeah, or as they say, paralysis by analysis.
Yeah, man. I love that paralysis by analysis.
You never heard that before? That's an old one.
Brian Kroc has this great quote, a mantra, and it's something that he put on his first record, the Big Heart Machine record. It's "Don't analyze." I always loved that. It was like a mantra for himself, a piece he wrote to himself to remind not to analyze analysis paralysis. I do like that. So this is a bit more of a tricky question, but when you were transitioning from like beginning, just starting out into like, you know, and this is the part of the question that is hard is like transitioning from like beginning to intermediate. What were some of the challenges that you encountered, and and how did you get out of it?
Beginning to intermediate, like as like a
As a
player, or like as a writer, or what do you mean?
as a writer. Yeah.
Um, well, like I mean, like dealing with the notation system, that was like a big challenge, having to figure out how to like actually put my ideas into that. Um, Figuring out how to make the charts look clean enough that people could actually successfully read what I'm writing. Um, I feel like I'm not getting to the meat of what it is that you're asking. Um,
It's a super hard question, man. I
can,
like
can, can you
I've
can you say it again? Like just ask me maybe another.
Yeah, when you're transitioning from I mean, and looking back on yourself, like the hardest part of your journey, and I'll speak from my own perspective. The hardest part of my own journey to identify is like where I would say I was at an intermediate writing level. Why is that the hardest place to analyze or to look back on? Because I always feel like there's more to reach for, and I don't feel
Yeah,
like I'm done growing yet. And even still, like there was a point in time where I felt like, the thing that was holding me back from writing better music was a craft thing rather than an art thing. So I guess as I'm talking that through, that's really what I'm asking about is the craft itself, the craft of big band writing. So when you're transitioning from like beginner, like, and I what I would put what I would label a beginner is someone who's just going for it, someone who's just like writing something. They're just like they're dipping their feet in the water, they're diving into the deep end. That's how I
yeah,
did it. That's how I show my students of all levels to do it. It's just
yeah. I
dive
mean,
into the deep end. And then like as you're like sink or swim, as you're swimming, like that's where I would put the intermediate at. Like, some stuff you're not happy with where you're at. What makes you unhappy with where you're at? What stuff do you look for to improve upon?
yeah. I mean, I definitely think the craft kind of stuff, like which is basically like kind of like performance practice and like just the reality of the world kind of things. Because like I think my writing got so much better when I got to the University of Miami. A is because I finally took like an arranging class. There was actually no undergraduate arranging classes at Juilliard when I was
Yeah,
there.
I have
So like
heard
so
that.
like that was like all just like trial and error method for me. And then when I got to school, I was in Gary Lindsay's program at the University of Miami, and I saw like these other arrangers and like their charts look like super crisp and clean and stuff like that. I was like, wow, I don't even know how to do that. And I knew that he expected like a certain level like that too. And our first assignment, actually, he was like, write a big band chart, and like gave us no stipulations. He was like, just write something for big band, um, and this is the due date. And so then we all did that. And what ends up happening, like in the arranging program, I think we wrote three big band charts like that first year. And each time we would have 20 minutes with the CJB to like rehearse and record it. So basically you would like run through it once. And if there's something really hard, then you could like spend like 2 or 3 minutes on it, and then you have to like record it. So like that kind of ensured that you had to have everything like clearly written, so that was kind of like, I feel like that for me was like a big changing point, because like my older stuff, like there's so much information on there that like we would have to discuss because it wasn't clearly written. You'd be like, oh, so you have the repeat bracket here, do we go back there, or is it like, or the DS is missing from this chart, or this is like, you have this note, and you know what I mean, like there's just all these like little tiny like nuances that would take like a long time in rehearsal to sort out in order to make it right. And you just didn't have that luxury if you wanted your chart to get recorded. Like you just couldn't do it. It had to be like clear, you know?
Yeah, man.
I
That,
feel like
that
that really solidified everything, you know.
yeah, that's such a powerful experience. I think generating the trust within yourself that what you're going to put on the stand and how it's going to sound with the band, and those being the same thing as what you heard in your head, just having that trust is probably the thing that, does get you from beginner intermediate into the advanced uh territory.
Yeah.
And and what I was thinking about when you were talking is just a simple phrase, function over fashion when engraving. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, well, we already sort of talked a little bit about this, but looking ahead to future projects, and just even things that you're writing right now, like what kinds of things are you finding that you're focusing on, just in terms of like writing, or it doesn't even have to be something that you're focusing on, just things that you're noticing even.
Yeah. I mean, I write kind of like I kind of go through waves, you know. I'll like not write anything for like a few months and like just in November, I wrote like two charts. Um, yeah. I mean, I don't know. Like, I'm not really questioning a whole bunch right now. I'm just kind of just, I've been trying to listen to more music lately. That's another thing that's like obviously huge. It sounds obvious, but so many of like my students, for instance, were trying to write like, you know, septet music, four horns and rhythm section, or you're trying to write for saxophone section or trumpet section, bone section for big band. And if you don't listen to those styles of music, if you don't listen to that ensemble, then it's like you're essentially inventing the wheel, you know. It's like there's like a such a long history and so many different recordings that you can listen to reference like what can be done in these different styles and like some different texture ideas, you know.
Mhm.
um
So what are you
yeah,
listening to right now?
lately I checked out this I listened to this Jimmy Heath record. I think it's called Togetherness.
Cool.
uh, I started listening to that recently. I was listening to Vince Mendoza's new record, Olympians.
Yeah.
Um, I was listening to this Jim McNeely record called Rituals. It's like all the like, uh,
Stravinsky stuff.
yeah, exactly. Um, yeah, so like I'm always kind of like checking it out, and I listen to a lot of stuff. Like I'm listening to like again like for texture, you know. I don't really, I'm not really trying to seek to like steal melodic devices from a lot of these writers, but like I like to try to find like orchestrational. And I don't even really consciously do it honestly either. I just like listen to it. You know, I like big band
Yeah.
music. I like listening to large textures. You know, so I think that it makes sense that I write big band music. I assume you listen to big band music too. Um, you know, so
Yeah, it's sort of like what you were just saying earlier about your experience in the wind ensemble, like it's almost like a what's the word? Musical osmosis.
yeah,
When you're listening to something and you're doing it actively, you're not doing it to take a certain thing out of it. You're listening to it for enjoyment even, and you know
yeah,
just being around that and like mentally, and sonically imparts stuff on our musical spirits. So
yeah. I mean, ultimately, I feel like the stuff that we actually love is the stuff that ends up coming out in our playing and our writing anyway. You
absolutely.
you can try to force, like, you know what I mean, like you have a teacher's like you got to transcribe this Charlie Parker solo, and you could like practice it and transcribe it and listen to it, but if you don't really love it, you're probably still not going to play like that, you know.
Right.
uh that's just the reality of it, you know.
Hmm. Yeah, man, super, super interesting. Well, dude, Javier, I could keep asking you tons of questions, but if you don't mind, there's actually like a couple of people who love your music in the Facebook group who have asked a couple of questions. Can I
Oh, okay, cool.
can I communicate a few of those and just get your hot takes?
Sure, sure.
We can do sort of like a lightning round if you want.
Put
Okay,
on the
so
last tab here.
this first one actually comes from a student of mine. His name is Marco Passini. He said, "What made you work again on the same composition, Tesseract, and add that killing shout chorus? he put in parentheses, maybe years later. And to connect this question to the next, what's your idea of coherence when composing?
Uh, I mean, it's the simple answer is just like I thought it was a cool enough tune that like deserved to be brought to the level that I think it should be at. You know, I think that it needed something else. Like there was never like a really big arrival moment in that tune, like where the whole like brass section was hitting in rhythmic unison. And that's basically I felt like I wanted it to get to that. I think yeah, the part that he's referring to, there's like this little part where the horns break apart. And then so that whole thing there, I think in the original one just went into the drum solo or something. Which like just thinking back to that going into the drum solo, it's like, oh, so lame, what a letdown. Like, you know what I mean? It's like this whole little thing like happening, these like flurries, and then it just like goes into a drum solo. It's like, oh man, you know? So I think that's probably what it was. Like, I mean, I'm always thinking about that's one thing I do try to think about is like, where is this all leading to? You
Yeah.
know what I mean? I do think about like peaks, you know, in my music, like and orchestrating in a way that allows that to happen naturally sometimes too, instead of artificially. Because I feel like dynamics are artificial, right? Like orchestration is like the real way of making something bigger or smaller, you know? And, you know, left fewer instruments leading up to everybody hitting together. Like obviously like the whole band playing in octaves in rhythmic unison is going to be like the biggest thing. The next biggest thing is like harmony in rhythmic unison, you know?
Hmm. Yeah, I
So
definitely, yeah.
yeah.
Oh, that's super great. And I don't want to steal Marco's thunder with his beautiful question, but just to respond really quickly to what you said, I love the process of orchestrating a natural crescendo, a natural diminuendo. Bob Brookmeyer was like an absolute master of this, like absolutely masterful orchestrator of dynamics. But at the same time, you know, Count Basie, for example, like you can have that entire band playing and they're just gonna sound like a whisper if they want to, if it's
Yeah.
written that way.
Yeah.
Or they can just sound like freaking huge, you know? And so like it's both are possible. That's what makes big band so beautiful to me, one of the things. So Marco had another question for you. He just asks, "It's all right with me. What was the process of writing such a beautiful arrangement? Just love the way you move all the bass lines."
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, yeah, I mean, like that one was just like just sitting at the piano and just, you know, obviously you can just kind of mess around with like all these different ways of reharmonizing the melody. And you know, like I feel like, yeah, I'm trying to really think about like what that process was. I mean, I just sat at the piano and sang the melody of the tune and came up with different ways of changing the rhythm, changing the harmony, and ultimately came up with that. I do love like Latin stuff and not even really traditional Latin stuff. I just love like the way like different types of rhythms fit together, you know, and they have like a Latin tinge. Like I'm pretty sure if some guy checked out that chart, some guy that's like a real like he's like, no, that's not like the real, you know, it's like whatever, man. I don't really care if it's like the real thing. Ultimately, some people on some island at some point decided that that's what the real thing is. It's like, why are you a god? You know, you're not a god. You're just a person that decided some stuff. You know, it's just music. So, you know, it's just all of
Yeah.
these different influences coming together. And I try to remain a little bit tasteful as far as like the common tone movement and stuff. In
Hmm.
my opinion, here's a hot take for you. Like like the Jacob Collier type stuff is just like a little bit obnoxious to me. You know, it's like how many different chords can I put on this one note? Like, does every note of every melody have to be a different
Send
chord?
this to him. I'm gonna send this to him now that you said that.
You know what I mean? It's like the perfect like internet, like, you know, viral clip jazz, like of our generation. It's like, you know, like if you only got 10 seconds to like show everybody what you got, then like, you got to put a different chord on every note. So I try to stay true so that it sounds like the tune, but then it has some like extra little special moments that you wouldn't
Yeah.
expect, you know.
Yeah. Man, beautiful. Um, all right, a couple more like hot takes, or let's do real speed round here. Matthew asks, he just says, I'm curious as I've recently delved into his music, what do both of you think of Claire Fisher? You checked out Claire's music?
I haven't really checked him out. What's like a couple charts or something that he's done, or famous things that he's done?
I can't actually think of any names right now, but I met his son, Claire Fisher's son, about a year ago out in LA, when it was like the Grammy week, and he looks exactly like Claire. So
Oh, okay.
I don't
I
know.
didn't,
That's what
wasn't there like some tune that he wrote that's like super famous? It was like a like number one
Yeah,
Billboard.
I think Ido Lupina is a big Claire Fisher tune.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
not even familiar with it, to be honest.
it's like it's a nice ballad. You'd like it. It's like a nice ballad-ish thing in A flat. It's got like a nice groove underneath it.
Oh, okay.
I'll send it to you.
Yeah.
All right, another hot take. Bruno Tapia. And when do you have to adapt a big band chart to smaller formats? Okay, so going from like big band score to reducing. Do you do that ever? You have
I've done that fewer times than the other way. Um, I've had a couple like small group tunes that I've arranged for big band. And so when I arrange it for big band, I end up getting a little bit more creative and adding more like sections. Like maybe there'll be like a new soli section or something that I add to the big band version that wasn't in the small group version.
Mm,
And then later on, I'll take it and I'll be like, oh, the small group version should have that too. That'd be cool. So I mean, that's just a matter of just like deciding which parts are the most important. You know what I mean? Um,
totally.
yeah. So like if you have like a shout section that's like, you know, 6 note voicings the whole time or something like that, and now you only have 2 horns playing that shout section, maybe you just got to do like make them just play in octaves or something, and maybe certain places they can split off into a 2-part harmony, or maybe there was like a counter line happening in that shout section, and so you just have each horn doing a different line, you know, and they cross around each other. So that's just up for you to decide which parts of that you think should survive the distillation process, essentially. Like what are their, you know, what are the most important aspects of that still, you know, that still what's the word for it? Express the vibe that you wanted, you
Yeah.
know?
Function over fashion.
Yeah.
Yeah, and clarity as well.
Yeah, definitely clarity.
So Juan um asks, he says, what's your process of thought, your thought process while revisiting slash remaking something and trying to make it sound completely new? So like I guess paraphrasing, like when you're working on an arrangement, going off of Marco's question, which was very specific to like the counterpoint, do you have a general approach to arranging a tune so that it sounds different than the original?
But like a standard, you're saying, like not arranging like one of my own compositions, I assume. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, well, first of all, I don't think that you need to make something sound different from the original per se. You know, I think that if like that's like automatically like I have to make this sound completely different. I feel like sometimes that might be like a bad thing. Like, you know,
Hmm.
because then you end up just writing Jacob Collier arrangements where every note is a different. No, but like, but
Yeah.
in reality though, like, you know, like not every tune, like some tunes I feel like are so good the way they are that if I'm arranging it, I'm just really just adding extra voices to something that already exists. Like trying to think of like an example. I don't know, but like I mean, it really to me it really depends on the tune.
Mhm.
Um, like like Lil Darlin or something, right? Like if I'm doing like an arrangement of that, it's like, dude, like, am I going to really turn this into like a 12/8 Latin tune or something? It's like, I don't want to do it. You know, if I'm arranging that, like
Do you
I'm
have a
probably
general
just gonna.
approach to arranging? Sorry about that.
That's all good.
I'm reading the comments and I had a little bit of a technical difficulty on
It's all good.
of my own making. Um, but while you were speaking just then, like, you're coming back to harmony a lot in terms of the arranging process. And I think that that's one of the first places that I go to as well. Um, and yet there's so much more. Like if we Bob Brookmeyer used to talk about a derangement. It's like what happens if you like really pull apart the the inner workings of a piece and like really
Yeah.
like put it back together in like a Frankenstein sort of way. Like you got to do that with more than just harmony. You've got to really like dive into like what makes this piece from a rhythmic perspective, from a melodic
Yeah.
perspective, you know, and how can you use those elements as well in the arranging process?
Yeah, and I think that sometimes, like in the arranging process, like especially with standards and stuff, I think if the rhythm is varied too much, the melody becomes obsolete as well. You know what I mean? So like, I mean, one of the most common things you hear in people arranging standards, and I think I do it and It's All Right With Me too, is like elongating the melody, where you can like sit on one note and then do something. You know what I mean? Bum 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 bee, bum 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 bee. But like I think like mine is like it's the wrong time. Now it sits there for a second, and now you have like a chance to like do something underneath it. Um,
Yeah.
but like if it's like it's the wrong time, I guess like there's people that have done stuff like that, you know, and
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. For me, at a certain point, if you vary the rhythm of a melody as much as you vary even like the rhythm of the melody is almost just as important to me, or at least maybe the phrasing of it. Like certain parts delivered in a certain way kind of have to remain intact, in my opinion, in order for that still to sound like that tune. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, man.
Like I couldn't like I don't think like it's the wrong time like that. Now it doesn't sound like the same tune.
Yeah, no,
You know?
totally. Yeah. I always say the fun of arranging is like figuring out how to put your own stamp on a song without rendering the original song completely unrecognizable.
Yeah.
And a song like It's All Right With Me is so perfect for that example because it's just like chock full of awkward places to stop that sentence. Hey, it's well, man, Javier, dude, thank you
Yeah.
so much for making the time to chat tonight. Man, I hope everybody who's tuning in right now will go and take a listen to Kemet and whenever you've got some other music coming out, please let me know so I can share it with the group and also just as a fan of yours, check it out.
Cool. Yeah. For the record, I don't hate Jacob Collier's music. You know, there's just some aspects that I think, a little too much sometimes.
It's to me, it sounds like you might be backpedaling a little bit, my friend.
I don't hate it. I listen to it. Was a couple of those, what are those like, those vocal arrangements and stuff that came out. Everyone was like, oh,
Man, I will say, I mean, I actually I really love Jacob Collier and his music. I think he's got a real gift, especially with harmony. I'm blown away by it. Um, and but you're not the first person to share those. The beautiful arrangement that is Grammy nominated right now through Sage Voices in the wee small hours of the morning is arranged by the four girls of Sage and Jacob Collier, and it's one of the most beautiful renditions of In the Wee Small Hours of the Morning
I'll
I've
have to check it out. I'll have to check
I've
it out.
ever heard in my life. Man, like I'm gonna send it to you as soon as we're done here.
Oh, cool.
Dude, Javier, you're the man. Thank you so much. I'm not actually gonna send this to Jacob Collier. You're safe.
I mean, I don't
Um,
mind. He can know, like, he must know that not everyone loves it. And no one loves everything.
well, man,
I'm sure
you
there's
know
plenty of
what?
people who don't like my music either.
You just got to write what you write and be who you are. And,
Yeah.
you know, that's all we can do. That's what self-expression is all about.
Yep.
Uh, any last parting words of wisdom for young budding big band composers and arrangers?
Yeah. I mean, just get a band together and write music and have them play it as often as you can, especially if you're in school. Take advantage of the fact that you have a big band that probably meets quite a few times a week. Take advantage of it, write as often as you can, and have people play it, real people play it.
Awesome, man.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Javier.
Of course, man. Thanks for having me on. Yeah.
My pleasure. I'll talk to you later, bro.
All right, man. See
Peace.
ya.